When it comes to graphics card launches, it's been said in recent times that AMD's Radeon Group never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. With the RTX 5090 and 5080 basically being somewhat of a paper launch, this then falls to AMD to have the perfect opportunity to launch a GPU with much success. And the weirdest thing with AMD, it seems like their CPU division is the complete opposite. They just keep nailing every CPU launch one after the other, to the point where they've taken so much market share off Intel over the years, and now they're the dominant player when it comes to the CPU game. But with the GPU game, it's almost like it's a complete different story. But this time around with the RX 9070 XT launch, I'm hoping that AMD does nail it, because with the 5080 and the 5090 launch, we just saw there was absolute chaos, and in fact there wasn't enough stock available, especially versus the previous launch for the 4090 and 4080, where there was actually a lot more stock available. So exactly what are the rumors and what will the performance be like with the RX 9070 XT? And here's where I asked around with some contacts in the retail scene, and I got some really interesting answers. The first being these cards have indeed been stockpiling in some warehouses in different countries around the world since even before Christmas, meaning AMD was intending to launch this GPU at CES with an announcement of a release date, but then they pulled the pin and they pulled this back. I'm told it's going to be in sometime between mid to late March. That's when the actual official release date will come through for these cards. Of course, with the embargo performance reviews lifting a bit earlier than that. So just how fast will the new RX 9070 and 9070 XT be? Well, let's find out right after today's video sponsor. Do you need to get Windows 10 or Windows 11 activated and don't want to spend $200 or some other exorbitant price? Well, if so, today's video sponsor VIP SCD Keys has you covered. For as little as $15 using the coupon code BFTYC, you can get Windows 10 activated, and for a little bit more you can get Windows 11 activated too. Links in description below to find out more. Welcome back to Tech Yes City, and you may be wondering, how fast is the RX 9070 XT going to be? Well, there's actually a lot of things, in my opinion, that point towards roughly a 25 to 30% uplift over the RX 7800 XT. And this is coming from the fact that also the tweets and the rumors released from AMD themselves, an employee called Frank Azure, he's on Twitter sort of saying, look, this card is definitely going to be a lot faster than what people think it will be. But also, when we look at the raw specs themselves, the rumored specifications on Tech PowerUp's database, we see here that we're carrying roughly over 4,000 stream processors. And when we compare that to a 7800 XT, that's got a little bit under 4,000, but the biggest difference here is those clock speeds. I believe the RX 9070 XT is going to ramp up over 3 gigahertz in the real world. So it's going to have at least a 10% boost in clock speeds over the 7800 XT, plus coupled in with the RDNA 4 improvements over RDNA 3, you can expect maybe a 10% uplift there too. And then also coupled in with the more stream processors available, roughly 7%, we could see roughly a 30% performance uplift over the 499 7800 XT. Now, looking at some of the models that we were able to see at CES, as well as some of the tweets that have come out from the board partners, they've said that, look, this card is taking 2 8-pin PCIe connectors, so the power consumption is not going to be massive by any means. It's actually going to be a really well-balanced GPU, and in fact, the 7800 XT on a lot of those models, they carried 2 8-pin PCIe connectors as well. So this card, in my opinion, is going to perform somewhere around an RTX 4080 to an RTX 4080 Super, and then that leaves the NVIDIA card coming out, the RTX 5070 Ti, right around that price performance level, and that's going to come in at around $750. We already know that. The performance numbers for that will be officially released later this month, and if anything, we saw the RTX 5080 numbers, and the 5070 Ti is going to perform less than that. And so that means that AMD does have a bit of pricing headroom here to work with. Are they going to price this thing at $549? Are they going to price it at $599? Or are they going to price it even at $499 and go extremely aggressive? And that remains to be seen, because as we said in the intro, the rumors are piling up. I know these things have been stored in warehouses for months, and there could be some extra delays added on top of that as well. So at this stage, I think this card is going to have great raw performance, especially when it comes to rasterization. And when it comes to the RDNA 4 improvements with other things like ray tracing and also some of their own technologies with FSR4 and how well that compares to DLSS 4, for example, that remains to be seen. It does seem like AMD is always a step behind NVIDIA, and they do follow the leader in that aspect. And as I've criticized AMD in the past, I'd really like to see them do something unique where, for instance, with the RTX 5000 series launch, NVIDIA just recently released their new Transformer model, and that is really being well received out of all the things with the RTX 5000 series. I think that's probably the best thing they did with the 5000 series launch, because they allowed all RTX users, whether it was 2000, 3000, or 4000, to benefit that came with that Transformer model uplift. So when it comes to the new AMD Radeon cards, raw performance, I'm all on board for that. The other features remains to be seen, have to use it. But then when it comes to the actual reasons why this card is delayed, this one is probably the most ambiguous yet. Because one thing we have to realize by now is that there is a silicon shortage for gamers. Because in the world of limited supply, the supply always goes to the highest bidder. And so that just happens to be at this stage the machine learning and AI market. They're just sucking up all the silicon with no regards for us poor gamers. And you know, one thing that does piss me off a lot about this industry is it's the gamer that built these companies up, especially NVIDIA and Radeon, which was previously ATI. It was the gamers that put these guys on the pedestal and enabled them to become so successful. And yet it seems in 2025 more apparent than ever that these companies just don't give a damn. But in the case of AMD's Radeon group, maybe they do give a damn. And so we're going to wait and see here, because maybe they were just waiting for a heap of stock to pile up, so they had enough stock for day one. That is a possible reason. But there's also another reason that does leave me a bit skeptical, and that is because the driver updates. We haven't seen a driver update from AMD actually since late November, even though it was released in early December for the official driver package. When you look at the driver date, it's actually late November. And with all the new games that came out over Christmas, especially recently, like things like Kingdom Come Deliverance being extremely popular, you'd think AMD would have a driver update available. So there are rumors floating around that perhaps something has gone seriously wrong with the driver team at AMD, and they're having a lot of internal problems, and that's causing driver update delays. And so that could be a big reason for the delay in these GPUs. Another reason, of course, is as we hinted at before, they're actually waiting for the RTX 5070 Ti and also the 5070 to release and see the performance numbers of those cards, just to see where they can price their RX 9000 series cards at, especially when it comes to that just $100 or even $50. Because you have to remember, if you do sell 1 million cards at an extra $100, that's an extra $100 million in revenue that you never had. And so if the RX 9070 XT can beat out the 5070 Ti, and they were originally going to plan it at $499, they can now say, well, maybe we can price it at $599. So that does remain to be seen. But if anything with the pricing, I do believe it's going to fall somewhere in between $499 and $599. Though the final reason for this delay, as we talked about before, is just that silicon shortage. They just can't allocate enough silicon to the gaming graphics cards, which are usually a lot cheaper than business-to-business grade cards. Especially if we look at the prices of the Quadros and the Fire Pros, those things are much more expensive than gaming cards, despite using a similar amount of silicon. So in conclusion, with the RX 9070 XT and 9070, I think it's definitely worth waiting if you can wait another month and you want to buy a card around the $500 price point. It's going to be worth the wait to see what AMD brings to the table. And if anything, AMD's got the perfect opportunity now, because we saw NVIDIA with their stock levels on launch, they were abysmally bad. And then we also saw with the Battlemage launch before Christmas, the stock levels were also abysmally bad there. Even though Intel had the good intention of having a really hard-hitting card at a good price point, they just simply didn't have enough stock to deliver on day one. And the funny thing was, I thought the day one driver for the Intel B580 was actually really impressive. They did a good job. And even to this date, the B580 is slowly trickling back into stock, at least in Australia, but it quickly gets sold out after it comes back in stock and people know that this GPU is back in stock. So there just needs to be more silicon allocated to gamers. So AMD's got the perfect opportunity here if they do have a lot of silicon that they've allocated with the RX 9070 XT and 9070 launch, especially versus their more chunkier models like previous generation 7900 XTX and XTs, and they're just allocating that silicon to what I think matters the most, and that's the mid-range and also entry-level gamer. And so one can only hope that AMD does get this right. Everyone's rooting for them this time around. Hopefully we don't get let down. The one thing I will say is that it looks like they're going with a monolith design versus their flagship model, the previous generation 9700 XTX, that was actually using their Infinity Fabric chiplet design. And if anything, that did have a few problems that I feel deterred people from buying the card, especially when I had some day one issues like the idle power consumption as well as the power scaling when it came to playing games that were then CPU bottlenecked. The GPU would just actually use up more power than it needed to. So it looks like with this monolith design, it should fix a lot of the problems that AMD previously had with the 7000 series launch. And again, with the AMD Radeon Group, they've just been handed the perfect opportunity on the platter. What are they going to do with it? Are they going to get those free throws and just completely airball them? Or are they going to get complete swishes? Remains to be seen, because if anything, the market needs this more than ever, especially after the near paper style launches from Nvidia and even Intel to some extent. Anyhow, guys, do let us know in the comment section below what you think about today's video. Are you looking forward to the RX 9070, 9070 XT? Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. And with that aside, I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.